Thanks, Max. And I'm actually really impressed and excited you all showed up for a compliance talk early in the morning. So thank you for being here. Like Max said, my name is Paris. I lead the information security group.
And I'm Gustavo. I'm a software engineer in InfoSec department.
So today we'll talk about how we use the Datadog platform to monitor our compliance and audit needs. So before I kick it off, quick show of hands. How many of you are either part of a compliance team or assist the compliance team with some of the audit and compliance?
Oh.
OK, wow, so almost 50% of the room. How many of you think that compliance is hard and collecting the data and addressing your needs is not as straightforward? OK, almost an equal amount of people. OK, so maybe this talk hopefully will answer some of those questions and address your needs. So let's get started. So today we'll give a quick overview of the challenges we had to solve for and the complexities we had to navigate, how we started thinking about and using Datadog products for our own needs to meet audit and compliance use cases. We'll talk about a few examples of what automation we have built ourselves to meet our compliance needs in terms of monitoring our controls and also collecting and storing evidence. We'll talk about how we are measuring success of the automation we've built. And then we'll have some quick get you started links that you can use in your own environment. All right, so I'll quickly touch on the complexity and challenges. The bulk of this presentation will be focused on solutions and what we have built ourselves and how you can start thinking about building something on your own. All right, so our business is rapidly growing, both in terms of number of controls and number of products that we are launching. We're also hiring a lot of employees, so that adds to the complexity. We are expanding in new geographic regions. This means that our infrastructure is expanding. You want to make sure we grow in a secure and compliant manner. But more importantly, we need to provide assurance that our controls are effective in our environment. So as you can tell by the growing number of logos, the compliance frameworks that we have at Datadog, maintaining them is not easy. There are a lot of overlapping requirements between the two. And so we have to make sure that we are monitoring for some of the key compliance controls that come with these certifications. And also, we are expanding in regulated markets. So we've got a lot of these customers who either bring their own auditors, and our GRC or our governance, risk, and compliance team have to address their needs, and also the third-party auditors that come in that audit us against all these frameworks that you see. So we are a multi-cloud SaaS platform, and we need to provide assurance to our customers that our environment is, as it constantly changes, we still are compliant and we can still maintain our certifications. Similar to many of the SaaS companies, we rely on many third-party vendors, such as Workday, Atlassian, Google Workspace, and these are just a few. And so making sure that our infrastructure stays compliant, we also need to make sure that our vendors are compliant, and the controls that we rely on that are being provided by these vendors are also constantly validated. And the population of what's in scope is also changing. So as we add more vendors, they are distributed among many different business units. So the ownership is distributed. So we have to make sure that we are meeting these owners of these business units who own these vendors where they are. And ultimately, in a diverse environment such as ours, we have to make sure that we are monitoring our controls that are spread across multiple cloud providers, distributed across many third-party vendors, and have different business owners. All right, so the Datadog platform is really good at several things. I'm going to quickly mention a few of them, and that's why we got started with the Datadog platform to monitor our controls. So compiling an inventory of our assets and resources in a multi-cloud environment, Datadog is really built for that. And that's something that's also very critical for audits. Your auditors want to see a complete inventory of your assets. And this is especially important for frameworks like PCI, SOX, FedRAMP. The platform lends itself really well to continuously monitor some of our controls in the cloud environment using products like CSPM, or cloud security product posture management, FIM, which is a file integrity monitoring. We also have an incidents product that you can use to show how you manage incidents in your organization. It's relatively easy to ingest data from third-party applications. So many of you, if you are in a SaaS company, you probably rely on a lot of third-party vendors. We certainly do. So you can bring in data from vendors like Workday, using our products like metrics, reference tables, and we'll talk about reference tables in detail later on. But here is where we can show compliance across both our cloud environment and the non-cloud environment, which is where the third-party SaaS is. And there's also easy integration that's built with other workflow products, such as Slack, Datadog, obviously dashboards, and Jira. So if you use Jira, you can easily use a Datadog platform to meet your engineering teams where they are. So if they're using these, if they use Slack in their workflow or Jira, there's a built-in integration. So we use that to our advantage when we were building this automation for ourselves. All right, so I'll give you a quick overview of some of the Datadog products that form the core of our monitoring, and then Gustavo will dive deeper into them. So from left to right, cloud security, which also the compliance frameworks as part of it. So these products are CSPM, so it's cloud, like I mentioned before, cloud security posture management, vulnerability management, compliance benchmarks. So they help track whether we are aligned with specific compliance controls. It maps your cloud configurations and vulnerabilities to common compliance frameworks and requirements. And then the next one is the workload protection. That provides runtime file integrity and process monitoring for your workloads. And so this is helping you detect any suspicious or unauthorized activity in your containerized environments on your hosts. For example, we use file integrity monitoring to show how we comply with some of the IPS, IDS related requirements for PCI, because it tells you near real time what's changing on those files or on those critical containers. Reference tables, we'll dive deep into this later, but reference table is a powerful tool that gives you the possibility to bring data into your Datadog environment and enrich the data that already exists in your Datadog environment. So we'll get into more details later. And then log metrics and dashboards. So log metrics and dashboards is interesting. It's the core observability products that we have, and they are not built for the compliance use case, but we have started using it by pushing our third-party SaaS data into those and then building monitoring on top of that. All right, so I gave you a quick overview of the challenges we navigated, why we started thinking of some of the Datadog products that we built. So before I hand it over to Gustavo, I also want to acknowledge that we are fortunate at Datadog to have an engineering team dedicated to GRC or compliance function. So not everyone has that, so it's also in line with our Datadog's engineering first culture. But we have some get you started guides later on in this presentation. So with that, Gustavo.
Thank you, Paras. Yeah. So as Paras already mentioned, we wanted to take a deeper look at reference tables and how they work, and more especially why you should care about them. Again, we see them as a very powerful tool to bridge the gap between the cloud telemetry data that we already have in Datadog, like metrics or logs from our host, and external data that we don't have out of the box to include in the Datadog platform. So reference tables allow you to do just that, to upload business critical data, like let's say a full list of the customers that you have or a full list of the employees that you have on your company, to upload that in a tabular format to Datadog. And then you can use that data to enrich the logs that you're having on Datadog. And that could be either when you're processing the data, when you are ingesting the logs, you can automatically add that context to them, or you can also reference that data when you're consuming the logs in the Logs Explorer, for example. To start with reference tables, you actually only need a CSV, like a CSV table with the data that you want to upload to that. And from that point forward, you can just start correlating the runtime data that you have from your host, from your logs, with the data that you just uploaded as reference table. But we didn't stop there. We also wanted to highlight the DD-SQL editor. This is in preview now, and how we can use that in combination with reference tables for the compliance use case. With the editor, you can get deeper visibility into your infrastructure. You can query it with natural language or with DD-SQL, that is basically a dialect of SQL with additional support for querying tags. You can use it to query hosts, to query containers, to query images. But the key insight that we had here is that you're also able to query reference tables that you just uploaded. So we uploaded several asset inventories that we were interested in, and this enabled us to already query those through the DD-SQL editor with combination of all the other telemetry that we already had available at Datadog from the host. So this allows us to extend Datadog's monitoring and analysis capabilities beyond just the cloud resources. We provide a more complete view of our control environment, where the data originated in the cloud or it comes from an external IT platform. So we talked about a lot of different products, and as Paras was mentioned, like we've seen some of those working out of the box, but now we want to explore a little bit more complex use cases where we start piecing together all of these different tools that was mentioned before. So the first one that we wanted to look at is what we're calling the training watchdog service. And to give you some context on what we were trying to solve, in this case, we lacked a scalable and a real-time process to give us visibility on the training completion status of our employees. And this was especially critical for courses that were required to meet compliance obligations. How are we solving that? So the first step was pulling the training completion data from the external platform, in this case, the different training platforms that we have at Datadog. We build dashboards to monitor the data in real time, and then we use automation to notify the employees that needed to take courses, and even to notify the managers that were the managers of those employees, so they can nudge them to do that. In this case, we use logs, we use metrics, we use dashboards, and more especially, we use the workflow automation product. We are just going to see in a moment how we pieced all of that together to solve this. But we also wanted to share some of the impact that we measured when we implemented this. We were able to virtually eliminate all manual work when we needed to do reassignments for courses. We could already detect which people needed to do the course. We could already detect if that person wasn't enrolled in the course, and we just enrolled them automatically. We're estimating that this automation alone is saving approximately 11 hours of manual effort every month. That's time that an analyst doesn't have to spend reassigning people and reviewing all the data, and they can spend doing something else. As I said, here's a high-level diagram of how we're using these Datadog products in combination to solve this problem. And the key challenge here is that we need to ingest the data from the external platform. Again, in this case, the training platforms that have the completion data of the courses. And to achieve this, we have a background worker that regularly pulls the data from the training platforms. It just processes it and sends it at Datadog as logs. So we're sending each log is a record for one employee, and that is the entry point to start using the entirety of the Datadog platform. And one key takeaway that we want you to take from this is that the piece sending the actual data to Datadog can be as complex or as simple as you want it to be. The only thing that we need is that it sends the logs that we're interested in to the Datadog. It could be like a very complex process that is running on the background in a full platform, or it can just be a script running on a cron job. And once we have the data available in Datadog, we can start leveraging all the tools that we have available to organize and display the key metrics and results. In this case, we have the data in logs. We are generating metrics from those logs. And with said metrics, we are building dashboards that are going to give you a more visual way to explore the data that we have there. But the key part in this automation is that those logs also serve as the input for the workflow automation product. It basically allows us that when we detect an anomaly, when we detect a deviation, in this case, an employee hasn't taken the course in due time, we can notify the user and take action with all the available Datadog integrations that we have. In this case, we are notifying through Slack, we're notifying through email, and we're even taking the step further of reassigning them if we need so. We're going to have time for questions at the end. Here you can see a sneak peek of the dashboard that we're using to monitor the training process made by our employees across various training platforms and courses. Using dashboards, we can dig into which employees have taken or not taken their trainings, the teams they belong to, the manager, the director, the VP they report to, etc. This also gives us like a burn down of training completion and help us estimate our velocity to meet specific audit deadlines. As we said before, we've integrated workflow solutions to auto-notify the employees that are getting out of time to complete their training platforms. And we go to the next one. We also wanted to share another example of our more complex use case on how to use Datadog. In this case, we wanted to take a look at what we're calling the change management watchdog. And the problem that we wanted to solve here is that we need to maintain change management oversight on all the changes that are happening in Datadog, meaning all the code changes that are happening in our code base. We are living in a fast-moving and automated development environment, and we needed to have that oversight without creating unnecessary friction to our developers to ensure that we'll keep moving fast. How are we solving that? We have a similar pattern where we have the data living externally. In this case, we have it living in GitHub. And we were particularly interested in the PR data, so basically all the pull requests that would merge the day before. So we're collecting all of that, we're evaluating that data against the compliance criteria that we want to check, and we're then sending the results as Datadog, and we're doing similar processes that we show in the training watchdog service. You can see a similar lineup of products that we're using. We're using logs, we're using metrics, we're using dashboards. But the new piece here is that we're also using reference tables and DD-SQL, as we mentioned before, to start building more inventories and necessary for audit purposes. To share some of the impact that this had as well, by doing all of this through Datadog, we reduced the false positives detected by 92% compared with previous efforts to automate this outside of Datadog. And we were able to detect stale approvals, or in other words, approvals that were made to a PR before the last commits were committed to those changes. So basically, those PRs had changes that weren't approved because the approval came before them. We were also able to come up with a post-merge approval, or basically it's a process where we detected that a PR was merged after we detected the PR was merged with all the necessary approvals. So we came up with this process to make sure that we could make an approval afterwards to make sure that that PR was compliant as well. Same as before, here's the architecture diagram or high-level diagram of how we're doing that with the Datadog products. And you can see that the high-level architecture is very similar to the previous one. We can see the same pattern where we are first collecting the data from an external source, in this case, the PR data from GitHub API, and we're then processing that information using a background worker, again, as complex or as simple as you need it to be, and we're sending that information as logs to Datadog. And from that point onwards, we're doing the same process. We're generating metrics from those logs, and we're generating a dashboard using said metrics. The new part here is that we're also using reference tables, as we mentioned before. We are uploading the inventory of the PR data, of all the repositories that we're using, of all the admin permissions that we have, because we know we will need them later on for audit purposes. And then we'll load them as reference tables, and we have the DD-SQL editor whenever we need to pull those records in a more structured way. Similar to that, this is a snapshot of the dashboard that we're using to take a deeper look at the PRs. And with it, we can explore how many PRs included sensitive changes or the PRs that have full approvals, and so on, and we can group them by repositories or by team. Having this data really available was the first step for us to increase the maturity of our change management controls. Automating the data collection enabled us to quickly test and measure the effectiveness of our policies. And after repeating the process of applying corrections and measuring its impact, we were able to arrive to a more comprehensive set of policies and procedures. This was key while developing the stale merges or the post-approval processes that we mentioned before. And with that, I will leave you with Paras that will talk on how we can build a centralized platform for compliance.
Thanks, Gustavo. All right, so as we started to build some of the monitoring for our key controls, we need to provide a unified, a better experience for our compliance team. So they didn't have to go to multiple different dashboards, multiple different tools to collect audit data, look at the inventory. So we started thinking of how do we get a better experience to them. So most of these, whether it's the evidence, whether it's the controls, they live in one single place. And we wanted to reduce audit fatigue. So we wanted to monitor for operating effectiveness of these controls and enable the security teams to take action when we got control deviations. And doing this manually causes audit fatigue. It causes engineering teams to get randomized. So we want to give that experience to them where we can bring everything under one single pane of glass for them. And so we also want to build the platform to handle automated notifications. Gustavo talked about a couple of examples where we are building automated notifications to our engineering teams. Where we want to make sure that the right control owners are notified when we automatically detect these deviations. And we plan to build auto escalations as we gain more confidence in some of our controls that we are monitoring. But also, the longer term idea here is we want to go from monitoring to prevention as we get higher confidence in our signals, and we reduce our false positives, and then slowly transition towards that space where we make it even easier for our engineering teams to take action. All right, so at a high level, this is how we have designed our compliance monitoring platform. So going from the bottom to the top, we are getting Datadog data from different sources, such as vulnerability scans, GitHub, like Gustavo mentioned, our own products, such as CSPM or Cloud Security Posture Management, that we use to monitor ourselves, these controls, and then we're also bringing in data from other third-party SaaS. So going up the stack, we aggregate and compile this data using products such as logs, reference tables, as Gustavo mentioned. We create an inventory of our production environment along with the teams that own and these controls. So there is ownership attribution that we have to establish. We have a defined set of rules or policies that we want to monitor against this population and controls against. We have to build automation that's continuously monitoring these controls against the rules and KPIs, the rules and the policies that we have already established. And finally, we have reporting in terms of Datadog dashboards, notifications, and alerting to the right owners when we detect these controls deviating from expected behavior. And with a future state where we want to either escalate or remediate or file an exception if we determine that the right course of action is to accept that remediation and not take action. So this is what our staging environment, this is a snapshot of our staging environment looks like, which has a few controls that we are continuously monitoring. And so as you can see, these are some of the key compliance controls. There is the change management that Gustavo talked about. And a lot of these controls are coming from our third-party apps that we're sending to Datadog logs, and we have built monitoring on top of that. And right now, an audit team member looks at this dashboard, and it follows up if there are deviations that persist for more than a few days. It could be because our environment is constantly changing. There might be an integration issue with an external API. So they will follow up right now and make sure that this is not that the signal has to be taken action on. And so as I mentioned before, as we gain more confidence in our monitoring of these controls, we will start to automate notifications and escalation using our workflow product. and the notification could be could be an email, could be a Slack message, or could be a Jira ticket that gets cut to the right owner. So diving a little deeper into one of the controls, this is an example where we are FedRAMP compliant. FedRAMP has this requirement where your documentation needs to be updated within 365 days. So now, without this monitoring, someone in the compliance team had to go look at 40+ documents, scroll through them, make sure they are updated, figure out who the right owner is, and then go notify that owner or go ping them to update this. Now, with this monitoring in place, they have to look at this dashboard. They have to look at, and they can dive deep and look at which documents need to be updated. They can kick off automated notifications from the dashboard itself. They'll notify the owner so they can go review this document and update it. And the KPI, this was built using some of the same data visualization tools by ingesting logs into our logs product, but also using CSPM and some of the other products that we have. All right, so we have seen how we're using Datadog to continuously monitor some of our key compliance controls. And now Gustavo will talk about how we generate and store evidence for our environment.
Thanks, Paras. So yeah, as Paras said, we already saw how we're doing this continuously, but we also need to generate evidence when we come to the audit time, and we need to prove to the auditors that we're doing what we say we're doing. So in a similar fashion, we're going to show a couple of examples where you can use Datadog products out of the box to supply this evidence, and then we're going to show one more example of how you do it in a more custom way. The first example that we wanted to share, Paras already mentioned that, but these are the file integrity monitoring rules implemented by the word log protection. And these screenshots of these rules and showing these rules to the auditors have been successfully being used as evidence to meet fine-related controls in post-audits. There is another example here of how you can use Datadog products out of the box, in this case, the incidents products. And we've used this directly as well to prove to our auditors how our incident response is looking like, and therefore helping us to comply with the incidents management controls necessary for different audit purposes. Here, auditors can see how we're responding to incidents, how we're managing them, and how we're closing them. So, and here we have populations or inventories. And to give more context on why we need this, one of the common asks from our auditors is the inventory of in-scope resources that they need to check. Let's take, for example, they will ask for a complete list of the employees that we have at the company. They will sample that population, and they will ask for more details on the sample that they just did on the entire population that we provided them. So for that, we build this, as we mentioned before, where we have reference tables and we have queries on our DD-SQL editor that help us to do those queries directly. That way, an analyst doesn't have to manually pull off the records to give it to auditors. We already have the queries that we know we are going to need saved in the DD-SQL editor, and we can quickly pull the entire list of employees to give it to the auditor. And when the auditor asks for a specific set of employees, we can also do that through the DD-SQL editor. And now we want to show how we're measuring and some of the success metrics that we're measuring. So as we build the tooling and automation for our audit and compliance needs, we needed to measure and track the impact that this was having on our compliance teams and the business itself. So one of the key metrics that we wanted to track and report is the number of hours saved from our analysts. And so the way that we build this dashboard is that we're estimating how many hours each of the automations or the population pools that we're automated is saving from a human hours perspective. And then each time those automations are being triggered, we add up that hours to this dashboard. And here we can see a breakdown by framework. We can see a breakdown by domain, by security domain, and have a more in-depth visualization of where are we saving the hours. And the other thing that we're using to measure our impact is the product analytics. But before we show you how we're using that, we wanted to give a quick recap of how product analytics works is a relatively new product. It was launched last year. So the main purpose of product analytics is to gain insight into user behavior and make data-driven decisions. It brings key insights by seeing every scroll, every swipe, and every click with an exact reproduction of what users went through by using our application. It can provide in-depth information about your application, like understand product adoption, track conversion rates and how they evolve over time. You can track key user behavior patterns, and you can also visualize the buttons and with the most and the least interactions on a given page. In our specific case, we're mainly focusing on which users and teams are using the automations that we built, as well as which specific pages of our internal application are spending the most time on. But we realized that also a key insight is who's not using our platform. We've designed this internal platform for some specific users, and we can check which of those users are not using our tools, and that is a key action point for us to reach out to them and ask them, why are not you using that? What are the frictions that you're encountering? And we can even see that in the tool itself, so we can have clear actions on what needs to be improved to make sure that the tool is more impactful. And now I will let Paras close it off with how you can do some of this yourself.
Thanks, Gustavo. All right, so a few Datadog products that you can start using out of the box. The first one is, like we mentioned, is the CSPM, or the Cloud Security Posture Management, and more specifically, the compliance frameworks feature that we have that you can use to evaluate your compliance posture against industry benchmarks and controls for benchmarks like PCI, SOC 2, or you can even create your own custom framework. Next up is the Datadog Workload Protection that we talked about. That's a product where you can specifically use file integrity monitoring to monitor critical changes on your files, specifically on critical containers that are in scope for your PCI. The other one is the incidents product that you can use to show your auditors how you manage incidents in your organization. And then this can help address some of the incident response requirements for frameworks such as PCI. You can bring in logs from your third-party apps and put it in a log management product that you can use to continuously monitor some of the controls, such as employee training, like we talked about, or change management. And then finally, a reference table. We talked about this quite a bit, but this is where you can bring in data from your third-party apps, enrich your data that already exists in your Datadog environment, and expand your control monitoring. So here are a quick codes or links that you could scan to get started on what we talked about today. And with that, we're open to questions. I'm going to go back and leave us here. And the floor is open if you want to ask questions. And we're going to be around even after the talk. So if you have questions, we can answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there is a question. You have a mic there, so it's being recorded. I don't know if.
Yeah, you can actually use the center mic to ask.
I was curious if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice when you started all of this. What do you wish you knew now that you've gone through it?
Yeah, reflections. I think the one thing we wish we would do differently is identify the most cost-intensive where we are spending the most time as part of our audit team, and start there. I think we started with a big bang effort, looked at a bunch of controls that we thought would provide the maximum value. And maybe if we had gone back and really dug deeper into, here are the controls, or here are the areas where we're spending the most amount of time. And so balance, maybe prioritize it differently. So that's what I would say.
Will Datadog be exploring, entering the market as selling compliance as a service, as a platform, similar to like Vanta and some of these other tools?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So we have a lot of that data spread across a lot of different products. I will never say never, right? So we started with observability. We are in the security space now. We already have some of the compliance frameworks that we can use out of the box. That obviously only provides assurance of your cloud infrastructure, so it doesn't provide you assurance of your all the controls are outside the cloud. So we have the capability. That's an ongoing discussion we're having with the product team. But right now we don't have a lot of details to share. But we've given it some thought, for sure.
Got time for one more if anyone has a question they're burning to ask. Otherwise, I'll ask another one. I'm warning you now. Why did you do logs to then go to metrics and then dashboards? Why not just run this on logs?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The main reason that we did that is for retention purposes, like the data retention purposes. Logs has a default retention policy of 15 days or 1 month. And given that we're working in the audit space, for some controls, we were interested in having more longer retention periods. We are expecting auditors to sometimes come and ask for the information from the previous year entirely. So you can do that with logs, but it's going to be a bit more expensive. So when we know that we had some questions that were going to be asked by auditors, and we had the logs to answer that, we converted those logs to metrics, and metrics has a much longer retention period by default. I feel like we're managing like 1 year of retention data there. So that way our dashboards can go way backwards in time to see how it evolved over time, that it will be able to if we were just using logs. So there is a relatively new product that can bridge that gap. It's called Flex Logs, if you're interested in that problem. But we implemented this before that product was launched.
Thank you very much for that really, really great talk. We're all going to give him a big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.